Have you ever wondered why some machines do lots of different stitches and other machines do only 1 or 2 stitches? Well, that's today's video. We're going to learn what's the difference.
Welcome to Pieces of the Past. My name is Deborah. I have a passion for fiber arts and creating new things from old. Join me on my journey as I explore the endless possibilities, the tools, and the techniques to create new pieces of the past.
We're going to look at all kinds of different machines today. We're going to look at your basic domestic sewing machine first, and then we're going to move on to specialty machines like a serger or an embroidery machine. And then at the end, we're going to go into looking at the bigger, more industrial machines, such as a Longarm machine, that kind of thing. Domestic machines are your typical machines that they look like this. They're for home use. They have multiple stitches on them. They do them all just fine. The different machines, there's not a lot of difference in the domestic machines except for size maybe. This one right here is a tiny little machine that I got for my niece, and it was super cheap, but it will sew 2 things together. So it's great for that. This one has more bells and whistles. It has more stitches on it. We're going to talk about in a minute what bells and whistles you need and what you really don't, and why they're on there. First, I want to talk about where to buy the domestic machines. So if you're just learning how to sew and you're wanting to get a machine of your own, you're going to want to start with a domestic machine. You can buy a domestic machine at several places. You can get one at a thrift store, which is great, which, you know, they tend to be cheaper. But they also tend to be older. They're used and not new. And they may or may not have all of the parts, like the power cord may be missing, or usually the instruction manual is gone, missing. So you don't know whether they actually work or not. But for $20, if you're handy and you think you can fix it, then, you know, by all means, that's a great way to get a sewing machine really cheap. You can buy a new machine from your local sewing center. These machines at your local sewing center are going to be more pricey. They kind of have to cover overhead and everything. The pros about getting it at your local sewing center are that you have service available all the time. They have a service department. The staff is usually knowledgeable about the machines that they sell, and you can try it out before you buy it. Now that's big. So you can go sit down at the different machines they have and mess around with them. And the reason I say that's big is because when we talk about the stitches in a minute, you'll see that these machines come with different stitches. Obviously, just your straight stitch, your embroidery stitch, your zigzag, okay, and then they come with some embroidery stitches and some fancy stitches, okay. So you can sit down at a sewing center and play with them and see what stitches you really need and what stitches you don't, okay. Now, the cons of buying at a local sewing center is that they are usually the most expensive option. The dealers often, or pretty much all the time, sell only 1 or 2 brands. They specialize in those brands. So you're only going to be exposed to those couple of brands. And then the staff is usually only knowledgeable then to the brands that they sell, obviously, okay? So you can buy a domestic machine at Walmart or a box store like Joann's, that kind of thing. The pros are that's less expensive and you get a new machine, okay? That you can return it. That's a good thing too. They got a pretty good return policy at those places. The bad part about buying a machine from Joann's or from Walmart or any of the box stores is they're going to be a plastic, cheaper version of the machine, a less expensive brand is what they sell, like Brother and Singer is what's sold at Walmart, places like that. So you're going to get a cheaper one, but you do pay less for it. And the good thing is that if you're just buying your first sewing machine, that's a pretty good place to get one, because you can get one inexpensive, you can play with it, learn how it works, learn how to operate it and everything, and then move on. And you'll see the machines as we go along here that you can move on to after you've used this one to its full capabilities. Okay, so the last place you can buy one is online. I like to buy my machines online, but I have many machines, so the pro to buying them online is that the price is good. Now, places like Hobby Lobby, and that's a box store, they sell only online their machines, so you have to think about that. The cons are when you go to buy online at a place like Facebook Marketplace or eBay, you're going to have issues with scams, so just be very careful in that. They are bad at this point. You have no warranty, you have no service options, and no after purchase assistance. So it's more of a risk, but you usually can get a better machine cheaper online. So, you just have to weigh your options on all of those pricing things. So Amazon is the other option, and Amazon is pretty much where I buy all my machines at this point. I work on my own machines, so I don't have that much of a risk as far as maintenance, but I like to buy my machines on Amazon. Mechanical machines versus electronic machines. I'm just going to touch on this briefly. Mechanical machines, if you're handy, you can service them at home. So that's what I like. I really prefer mechanical machines. Now, some of the machines that I show you later in this video there's no way they could be mechanical. For example, the embroidery machine. It is a computerized machine, so it can't be a just strictly mechanical machine. It has a screen and touch screen and all that kind of thing. Mechanical machines basically just do a couple of stitches or a few stitches, and they're all mechanical. You turn a dial, you don't touch a screen, so there's no electronic boards inside, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind. If you just like a car with all the electronics, if you buy that brand new car with all the electronics, you have to take it in to get it serviced. If you buy an old Ford, from the 70s or 80s, you can probably fix it yourself. So, just keep that in mind. The major brands. Now, the major brands of the domestic machines are, let's start at the lower end and go and move up. So we have Singer and Brother. Now, those are sold by Walmart, and they are going to be the least expensive, and they're also the least in quality, I would say. Okay, they're plastic. They have inside plastic parts other than the motor and some of the gears. They're plastic. So eventually they're going to wear out and break over time. But like I said, if you're just learning, they are great machines to grab and learn. They will sew things, a lot of things, until they wear out. So that's Singer and Brother. Now, Janome and Juki are focused on sewing, where there's another two brands, Husqvarna and Viking. Those are focused more on embroidery. Okay, so the Janome and Juki make great domestic machines and great industrial machines. So they're hardworking mechanical, get in there and sew things. So they're really good for making bags and backpacks and things like that. Husqvarna, Viking are more aimed towards embroidery and heirloom sewing, fine dresses, light fabrics, that kind of thing. So you've got those two companies, or two different types of machines going on there. Baby Lock is also in with Husqvarna. That's more the embroidery side. Let's start talking about the general sewing machine versus the heavy duty machine. So the general sewing machine is going to be a machine that you buy to make clothing, make drapes, make pillows, towels, quilts. All of those are general sewing machines. Your heavy duty machines, for example, like Juki makes a heavy duty machine, and even the industrials, of course, are heavy duty machines. You can get a mid-range heavy duty machine, and those are used more for bag making and leather working and canvas and light upholstery work. So if you're working on upholstery, they're really good for that. So thicker fabrics. Heavy duty machines usually have more powerful motors. So when you go to look at machines, keep that in mind. Look at the motor. All your Walmart brands and the cheaper ones that we talked about, those are all going to be your general sewing machines. Okay, they're just going to do your basic stitches and be used for clothing and things like that. Domestic machines that you can get and the stitches that they have. Okay, so you can buy a domestic machine that has embroidery stitches on it. Now, most of the domestic machines you buy say it comes with so many stitches, like it'll come with 20 stitches or 30 or whatever, and those are selling points that they put on the box. Okay, now if you're just learning, I would recommend that you stay away from anything that says it has this many more stitches. Okay, you need a straight stitch, you need a zigzag stitch. It's preferable to have a buttonhole making ability and a buttonhole foot that comes with it. Okay, those are your main things that you want on any machine, and pretty much any machine has that, except for maybe this tiny little guy right here. After that, you need to look at what you want to sew. If you want to be sewing heirloom things, then yeah, you may need some of those extra really fancy stitches. But for the most part, if you're just learning how to sew, though, you're never going to use those on the other end of the spectrum. So the first 3 stitches or 5 stitches on your machine that you're looking at, those are going to be the ones you're going to use all the time. And then past that, really look at those stitches, because you may not need those. Some of them come with, well, almost all of them come with a stretch stitch. I would recommend you get that too, because if you've never sewn before, you can use the stretch stitch to tell whether you want to sew knits. And if you want to sew knitted clothing, like, t-shirts, that kind of thing, then maybe you'll move into a serger later. Okay, so that's a good stitch to have on there. But all of these decorative edge stitches and things like that, really think before you buy them, because all they really do is make the price go up on the machines. You can, however, get a domestic machine that also does embroidery. And I had a Janome for a long time, and I even went so far as to make items for sale using the embroidery functions on that machine. Now, it had a screen on it, and it had the ability to put in a disc where I could, a memory stick, where I could transfer designs to it, and it would stitch those designs for me. That is when the embroidery part of the machine becomes relevant and a good use for you, is when you have that ability to put designs on there and actually stitch them out. That's a great combination machine if you're starting out. It will help you learn whether you want to do embroidery. I found that machine, I used it for years, and then I realized that I really loved doing the embroidery, so I sold that and I bought a separate plain sewing machine, domestic, and then a separate embroidery machine, which I will show you in a little bit. So it's a great way to learn about it. Those are good machines to get, but make sure you can get designs on and off of the machine, because the built-in stitches are the ones that I'm saying that you're probably not going to use anyway. Okay, so now let's start talking about the specialty machines. These are machines that do only one thing or two, and they do it very well. Since we talked about the combo machine in the last part of the video, let's move on to the embroidery machine only. The embroidery machine is usually a much larger machine. It has a computerized screen on it, most likely. It has the ability to either connect it to your computer or connect it to your sewing machine, or both, or put a memory stick in the side that will allow you to stitch embroidery designs. The embroidery designs that are available out there online are endless, so you can stitch anything on anything with an embroidery machine. The benefit to the embroidery machine over the combo unit is that the embroidery machine allows you to use a larger hoop. It allows you to do a lot more things, to stitch on a lot more things, because it's only good at that one thing. You cannot use it to sew clothes together. You can only use it for embroidery. Then we want to look at the serger, also known as an overlocker. The serger is used to stitch together knit fabrics for the most part. So if you think you want to make t-shirts or swimwear or undergarments, that kind of thing, then you're going to want to get a serger to do that. On the sergers, I would say that you can also use them to finish the seams that you've sewn on a garment out of woven fabrics. You can finish the seams. So instead of using pinking shears to go up the side of the seam to finish it off, you can just run it through your serger and it will put a nice little braided serged edge on it. You can sew woven fabrics together with a serger. It works great, but you only get one shot at it. It's not something that you can sew and then rip the seam out because you did it wrong and sew it again, because a serger will cut off the fabric to the right. So where your seam allowance is, that's where the knife is, and it will cut everything off to the right of that. So you have to be really sure what you're sewing. That's why it works really well for knits. Now, there's a different type of machine out there called a Coverstitch machine. And it's also an overlocker, but it does something else very special. It makes a stitch line on top of your fabric and it looks serged underneath. So have you ever looked at your blue jeans and you see a seam where there's two lines of stitching on the top, and then it's a zigzag overlock looking stitch on the underneath? That's a Coverstitch machine. Now, the Coverstitch machine does not have a knife. It doesn't cut off the fabric. So you're able to stitch with twin needles or even 3 needles on the top of the fabric in straight lines, where all the overlocking combination stuff is going on underneath on the back side. So it gives a really super nice top stitching effect. And that's what Coverstitch machines are used for. Okay, now let's look at machines dedicated just to quilting. We want to look at the Longarm and the sit-down Longarm, okay? The Longarm machine is a machine that is on rails. It's on a table. It's not on a table. It's on a long table, really, on rollers. And the machine moves back and forth and side to side, and you can stitch through the 3 layers of a quilt, the top, the batting, and the backing, by putting the quilt on rollers, and then you move the machine back and forth however you want the design to look that stitches the quilt together. Now the sit-down machine is the same type of machine, but you sit down at it, and instead of moving the machine around, you will move the quilt around underneath. Now you can do that with your home sewing machine. The difference is the sit-down quilting machine is dedicated specifically to quilting, and it has a very deep throat on it, where your domestic machine has about a 7 to 8 inch throat at the deepest, from the needle to where you can't move over anymore to the right. Well, a Longarm machine, they start generally around 16 inches deep, and they go all the way up to 24 or more inches deep, so you can get that whole quilt under there and move it around. I prefer a Longarm on rails simply because, well, there's several reasons. One is because it is computerized. It doesn't have to be, but my machine it has a computer attached to it. So like the embroidery machine, I can put in a design that I want, tell it what size my quilt is, and tell it to quilt it, and it will do it for me. I don't have to hold the handles and move it around or anything. I just let it do it for me. So I've gotten kind of lazy in my quilting. The sit-down machine is not computerized to that way of doing it. It is computerized where you can tell it how many stitches to do and that kind of thing, but you can't put a design in it and tell it to stitch it because it's not moving. You have to move the quilt around. So you're going to have to either use a stencil and draw the design on there, or you can stitch in the ditch between blocks, that kind of thing. So that's on the sit-down machine. It's really good for that. One of the other reasons I like the Longarm on the rails is because it's faster. It stitches a quilt in a day. I can finish a quilt in a day, where if I was sitting in a machine, a Longarm on a table, it's easy to do, but it would take me several days to quilt through a whole quilt because I'm having to physically sit there and move the fabric around. So that is the difference. Some of the differences. The sit-down models are cheaper because you're not buying the whole rail system and you're not buying the computer system and so forth. So there is that. But the sit-down version you can sit down at, which is nice because when I do my quilting on my Longarm, I have to stand the whole time to watch it and make sure it's not, breaking thread or running out of bobbin, that kind of thing. One last thing about the one that's mounted on a frame is that you can get what are called groovy boards, and those, if you don't want the computer option, which is quite expensive, you can just go with either stenciling it on and stitching over it by using the handles, or you can do free motion, which is just moving the machine around on your own. If you're good if you're artistically inclined, which I am absolutely not, you can free motion. You can just move the machine around however you like and quilt the quilt. There's also the groovy boards. Now the groovy boards you lay on this long table that's underneath your machine, and it has a stylus that goes down in the groove, and you just push the machine along the groove and it will stitch that design on the quilt. It's kind of like those toys we used to play with, where, what is it, pantograph, where you would have the design over here and it would draw it over here. That's how those groovy boards work, and they're pretty cool. So if you don't want to go the whole computerized option, that's a really an economical way to go. Last but not least, let's talk about the industrial machines. There are two industrial machines that I want to point out to you. There are others out there, I'm sure, that are very specific, but the two that I know about and that a home sewer would be interested in, I think, are the straight stitch machine and the cylinder arm machine. Now, the straight stitch machine does only straight stitches. That's exactly what it does. It will stitch all day long. It will stitch straight. It doesn't do buttonholes. It doesn't do zigzag. It doesn't do anything else. So when I stitch probably 80% of the time on my straight stitch machine, because I'm either sewing a seam on a item of clothing, or I'm sewing a quilt together, quilt blocks, and it's always just straight stitching. When I need a buttonhole or a zigzag, I go over to my lesser expensive domestic machine. But my straight stitch machine is an industrial machine, and it sews straight. Now, the industrial machines are stronger. They have bigger motors. They're more powerful. They'll go through lots of layers. I mean, you can stitch, I think in my Juki video, I made it to 8 layers of denim before the needle broke. And I think it was the needle's fault, not the machine. They're just more powerful. Okay, I don't usually stitch 10 layers of denim, but why not? Ah, broke the needle. The other machine is the cylinder arm machine. It is essentially the same machine. It's a straight stitch machine, but it's got the bed of the machine is this tiny little arm, just like it sounds. It's a cylinder arm, and it's used for sewing things that you have to get into tight spaces, like bags, leather bags, that kind of thing. Just hats, places where you have to sew really tight spots. And so that's what a cylinder arm is good for. I don't have that machine yet, but I'm looking at them. So anyway, those are the industrials. You can get what's, let's see, there's a company in the industrials that's really good. It's called Sailrite. They make a couple of them. Now, they do have an industrial, powerful, okay, those words are interchangeable, zigzag option. And it does straight and zigzag. It does nothing else, but it does those two. One of the things that I'll leave you with is that my industrial and the Sailrite industrial and even the cylinder arm, the top foot moves with the bottom feed dogs at the same time. So it has a top feeding foot, and it doesn't change. So like in the domestic machines, you can attach the walking foot so that you can feed layers through evenly. Well, the industrial machines have that built in. You can change the feet, but it's still going to walk as it stitches. When I was just learning to sew, I had no idea that there were so many different machines out there. And I started with the domestic machine and just kept getting different ones until I got the machines that work specifically for what I want to sew. So I think the key is to figure out, when you're learning especially how to sew, get the domestic machine, get the most economical version you can, but get the best one that you can for your money, in brand and in quality. And then just use it. Try to sew different things, learn what you like to sew, and then go move into the specialty machine for what it is that you like to do. If you like embroidery and that's all you like, then do embroidery. Get you a really nice embroidery machine. But I just thought it would be good to show the other machines that are out there. Maybe you haven't seen a Serger before or a Coverstitch before. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you can, like and subscribe. That would be awesome, and we will see you next week. Thanks for watching.